Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to CB BankAnalytics member training session and update. My name is Jeff Rigsby. I'm the President and CEO of CB Resource, and I'll be presenting today's training program. First, I do want to take this opportunity to thank you all for carving time out of your busy schedule to join us. In our invitation, we said the session will run an hour, and we're certainly committed to keeping to that schedule, almost to a fault. So if I go a little too quickly, please let me know. Okay, before we get started, just a couple of things. Just to get the most out of the session, there is a capability, though everyone's muted in this session, there is a capability to ask questions, and we're monitoring those on our site. So should something come up and you want to use the instant message feature and go to webinar, you can certainly do that. We'll have a brief question and answer program at the end. Like in so many of these webinars, and by the way, I'm very excited with the level of participation we have on today's call. We're covering every time zone, about 24 different states. So again, thank you all for joining us. So to that end, I always like to remind you that we're available anytime to support your efforts with the system. But as far as the materials we'll be going over today, this presentation will be available for your records. It'll also be in the CB BankAnalytics portal, and it will also be recorded. So to the extent you want it right away, just shoot us a note. But this presentation will be available for all of you from after the session. So now, as far as the purpose of today's session is to provide you with some hands-on introduction to using CB BankAnalytics. I apologize to our newest members in advance. I'm going to start with our latest, or the three most recent apps that have been launched in CB BankAnalytics, and so we'll be covering those first. So we'll be kind of diving right into the latest and greatest material, and then we're going to take a little bit of time and do a refresher, and that's going to take us back. So for those of you that are newer members, we'll go ahead and we'll cover quickly, how to find a bank, how to build a custom peer group. We'll take a look at the single bank profile app, benchmarking and key risk trends, performance analyzer, and we call it the B2B. It's the bank versus bank analyzer, the B2B analyzer. And then lastly, as we wrap up the session, I'd like to give you a little sneak peek or a little preview of the next app that's going to become live, something we call Gap Analyzer, and also the new community homepage we'll be launching in January. So that's kind of the flow of today's session. A little bit more about our training process. What I'd like to do is we are going to use the PowerPoint to kind of navigate through today's session. And what we'll do in each case is we'll land on each app that we're going to talk about. I'm going to give you just a quick overview of kind of features, highlights, how to use it, and then we'll jump right into the website and do an interactive demo. But I do want to kind of give you a brief overview of each of the apps' features and benefits, functionality, and then go ahead and show you how it works. And then lastly, just bear in mind too, for those of you that would like some additional hands-on support in terms of getting used to it, you can always contact us and schedule a one-on-one training program for you or members of your bank team. I mean, we have one, I think the user groups are growing, but we have one bank that's got about 9 users. So anyway, feel free to contact us, and we're always happy to schedule a hands-on training session. So in the interest of time, let's go ahead and get started. So first, the new apps. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Call Report Analyzer, which literally came online just within the last couple weeks, and we'll take a look at just what that application does and how to navigate it. Then we're going to take a look at our strategic forecasting and what-if model. And for those of you who haven't used it yet, it's certainly timely. This is strategic planning season. I got a very nice note and actually a call from a CFO with one of our member banks, and they happen to use the strategic forecast model in a board meeting, which I always kind of hold my breath when I hear that. It is still in beta right now, but anyway, it apparently went very well, and I got a great call. And then lastly, though the capital risk analyzer has been around a little longer than the other two, it's still timely because a lot about strategic planning season, even from a risk management perspective, it's always nice to be able to take a look and and take a look at capital adequacy and bring that in. So those will be our first three apps. We're going to dive in with those, and then we'll migrate into that refresher I talked about. So let's go ahead and take a look at the call report analyzer. And pretty straightforward, right? As far as accessing any of the apps, it always starts with the landing page or our member homepage. And so in this case, obviously, just go to the dashboard and click on Call Report Analyzer, and that will take you into the app. Now, you're going to notice when you land on the page, it's pretty bland, I guess, for lack of a better term. But what's really important as far as how you access the call report schedules, it's really a pull-down menu. Now, bear in mind, the way this application has been designed, and for those of you that have in the past perhaps gone to the FDIC site and downloaded a PDF or done a text export, the entire call report is digitized in our system, and it does a couple of things, and we'll show you what that looks like. But just to start, just bear in mind that every schedule and memorandum is in a simple pull-down, and you just start right there, and that gets you to the schedule you're looking for. Once you're in, you pretty much have access to a lot of data, right? So regardless of the schedule you're looking at, for example, in this sample, we're looking at loans and leases. So literally, you're one click away from either the actual schedule or the related memoranda. And in every case within the call report, you'll instantly view one of two images, right? You're either going to look at 5 consecutive quarters or 5 consecutive years. And it's literally a toggle function that I'll show you in just a moment. And for those of you that might be interested in actually looking at other banks, you also have the ability to select other banks that you might have in your saved file folder. What's kind of interesting about the call report analyzer is just all the things that it can be used for, whether you're doing a deep dive in any kind of trend analysis or deep research, if you're doing due diligence on perhaps a target bank, if you're conducting some risk management or even testing how your ALCO or ALM systems are going, it's really a useful tool. And I guess probably the neat thing too is you no longer have to rely on downloading a PDF. And just kind of my last comment before we jump over to it is everything you're looking at within the call report analyzer does export easily as well. So you can just hit the export button and it will instantly download the detail of whatever it is you're looking at, as well as it will tab any of the related memorandums that are associated with that page. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. So as far as we jump into the system, you would land on your landing page. You would go to Call Report Analyzer. And like I said, it's a pretty plain page when you get here. So this is what you're going to see, right? So you're going to see your bank name. You're going to see the pull-down menu and your export function. And of course, you can select other banks. So let's go ahead and just to get a little feel for it, let's start with RC Schedule C, which is loans and leases. So you can see, and the system is pretty fast, so it immediately rolls up to quarter-over-quarter performance for your loan portfolio. And to the extent you want to switch or toggle back and forth between year-over-year or quarter-over-quarter, the data moves just that quickly. So when you are looking at the year-over-year, it is going to give you a full 4-year look plus most recent quarter. Now, what's kind of handy about the system, though, in addition to the schedule itself, many schedules do have related memorandums. And so to this extent, if you want to look at the small business loan component, if you're looking, and I hope you don't have a lot of these, but if you're looking at your restructured or TDRs, they're quickly available. And probably one of the more handy research tools is the ability to go in and actually build maturity or repricing presentations or analysis. And I mentioned, as far as to the extent any of this data needs to be moved into a more useful format, just go ahead and click on the export button. It will drop it down into the into an Excel spreadsheet, and just that quickly. And you can see it will label your schedule, and there's your small business tab, there's your restructured, and there's your maturities and repricing. And then to the extent you want to build any charts or graphs or even run additional formulas, you're kind of poised to do that pretty quickly. And just to give you some additional views of the structure, gosh, even if you're looking at it well, it's probably not something a lot of our smaller banks will be looking at. But cash and cash balances, as far as credit quality goes, I know we have past dues and non-accruals. And again, you've got your full portfolio of past dues, either year over year, quarter over quarter, 90 plus, and your non-accruals. So to the extent you need an additional support mechanism to either do analysis on your own bank or perhaps a partner bank or a target bank, anything that you've used call report data for in the past is literally available to you and literally just a fingertip away. So that is the call report, and to the extent you are looking at other banks and you've saved them to favorites, you can move from bank to bank pretty quickly. So that is the call report analyzer. Oops. Try it one more time. There we go. Let's move on. So now the next one I'd like to walk you through is the Strategic Forecast app. And again, you would go to your landing page or your home page, click on Strategic Forecast, and I will caution you, it is still in beta, and the reason for that is it is a little more complex in terms of formula-driven model. It is a first release of a series of releases. Ultimately, it is designed to be a full budgeting tool, but I will tell you, today it is a strategic forecasting model, and that's primarily how it's used. And when you look at it, it does three things primarily, right? It provides a forecast, it provides this value analysis component, and then a summary of scenarios. So in this particular case, you can forecast up to 5 years. In addition to the various items you can evaluate, you can assess book and market value equity per share year over year, and you can compare up to 8 different scenarios side by side. And you would literally access those just by either going to Forecast, Value, or the Summary tab. Once you get in there, there is a wizard, and when you start building your scenarios, it's pretty user-friendly, but it can get better, and we're working on that. But literally, once you're in there, you would click on either Create or Edit a scenario, and use the wizard to basically populate your assumptions, right? And it's going to walk you through each of your assumptions so that you can drill down and come up with your growth rates, either net income or ROA, dividend policy, shares outstanding, and the wizard goes on to whether you're looking at adding additional capital, if you're looking at an acquisition, any type of scenario you want to build in, you can drop those assumptions in. Now, once you're in the tool and you've developed that scenario, you might look at it. So if you're looking at the, and actually I'm going to back, yeah, this is fine. So if you're looking at the forecast model itself, and I'm looking at the value screen right now. So let's just talk about that. So if you're looking at value, it's now aggregated all of your assumptions that you put in here, and as you can see, it's going to run out to a 5-year term, and you'll always notice that our leaping off point is your last full year plus current quarter, and then it allows you to build in your plugs or your assumptions, right? So if you click on the value link, it's going to lay out your 5-year strategy. It's going to summarize your net income, your dividends, book value or bank value equity, total assets, ROA and ROE over the years forecasted. But what it will do, based on your strategy and the scenario you selected, it will actually indicate what your book value equity is and various valuation levels on a 25 basis point increment. So in other words, it will give you what the book value and market value equity is between 1.25 times book up to 3 times book out over time, right? So you can take a look at that over your strategy and really take a look and see how value is being created if, in fact, you're effectively executing your strategy. And as far as the summary link goes, and I'll jump over and actually demo this for you, but this one allows you to actually go in and pull down multiple scenarios, right? So you can label them scenario 1, 2, 3, and so forth, and actually indicate which year you want to look at. And it's going to show you kind of the composite of your forecast, right? So it's going to take a look at, did you raise new capital? If you did, what was the price or conversion rate? What your total assets are? Net income, all of your capital ratios. It's going to give you your ROA, ROE, book value equity, market value equity, and scenarios on value for each one of those scenarios out over, and you can just literally pull down any year you want to look at. So let's go ahead and take a look at that and just see how that comes together. And so I'm going to go ahead and click on Strategic Forecast. I'm just going to randomly select a bank here. So this is your home page, right? So you can create or edit. And if you wanted to create a new scenario, you can literally click on Save Scenarios, click on the green tab, and you can see it's a pretty straightforward series of assumptions that you just populate. Once you've populated all the various conditions, go ahead and create a name and save it. And that is the working scenario. In the interest of time, I won't take you through populating one. But let's just go ahead and say we've got a scenario 1 we want to take a look at. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my scenario 1. Now what it's done is it's populated. So I'm looking at my last full year, my current quarter, plus my forecast. And what it's going to do is summarize my net income. And if I pay dividends, it will break down both the dividends in terms of dollars and rate, as well as if I raise any capital, I can expand that and show new capital in any year of the plan. And if you want to just plan 3 years out, you can certainly do that. Then it's going to walk through all of your capital components, both in terms of whole dollars first, as well as summarizing Tier 1, Tier 2 capital, total risk-based capital, risk-weighted assets, and kind of wrap up with total assets for leverage purposes and actually total assets. And if you assumed any acquisition in the process, that would also be picked up there. It kind of wraps up with your 4 capital ratios, so you can see your capital ratios move over the period of time of your planning horizon. You can see what your asset growth was in that given year, your ROA and ROE. And then the nice bottom piece of all this is, so what's going on from an equity perspective? So it looks at your market value equity based on 1.5 times book. It summarizes your total shares outstanding, and then you're looking at book value per share, market value per share at a 1.5 times book, earnings per share, EPS at a 17 multiple, EPS at a 20 multiple, and lastly, the actual dividend per share. So a nice snapshot of data. To the extent you want to move that into a more useful model and drop it into an Excel spreadsheet, you can do so. Oops, there we go. And, oh, no, that's the color. Let's go ahead and get that. There we go. So now we're looking at the strategic plan, and it summarizes each of those conditions. And to the extent you want to build some charts, graphs, or do other work with the models, you're now in the strategic forecast workable worksheet. Now what it does under the forecast, it also includes the value tab. So if you take a look at that particular strategy, which was scenario 1, it also gives you that value tab that would allow you to look at your net income, dividends, bank equity, assets, ROA, ROE, and various stages of multiples out over time from a value per share standpoint. And just real quickly to go back in, you can also look at value by clicking on the tab, and there is that value scenario. But probably the one I find most useful is clicking on the summary tab and building out my scenarios. So I may have a scenario 1, I may have a scenario 2, I may have a scenario 3, and let's say I've got a 4 and a 5. And I've used this in strategic planning sessions with my clients. I've had my clients use it with their board. But what it does do in a nutshell at that planning level, right, it's big picture stuff. It's not a budget exercise. You want to take a look at how any one of these scenarios perform in key areas over time. So you can select the year you want to look at. If you're looking at a 3-year horizon, you can quickly take a look at what the asset movement is based on the scenario assumptions. Scenario 1 might be a particular growth rate. Scenario 2 might be another growth rate. But you go ahead and label those and literally look at, okay, the average growth in each scenario you can assess. You can assess what the net income movement would be in year 3 or even year 5, just to throw that out there at the longest point out. What your Tier 1 leverage looks like, what your total capital ratio looks like. Do you have enough adequate capital to fulfill that strategy? It'll tell you that on this screen. Also summarize your earnings, book value equity, market value equity, book value per share, and then some basic assumptions from EPS and dividends per share and shares outstanding. So what you've managed to do in one page is summarize key components to 5 strategic alternatives. You can go up to 8 if you want. And again, it downloads pretty simply. And though you might not want to do a screen capture, but if you ever want to drop this into a PowerPoint or you're working on a presentation, there's several ways to do it, but one simple way of doing it is just using the Microsoft snipping tool, which allows you to go in and literally, highlight the forecast up to the year you're looking at. And that creates camera-ready art. You can drop that into a presentation or a Word doc and move on from there. So very easy to capture the information and go from there. Okay, so that is, and again, you can save your comparisons. And then you can view your existing comparisons. So if you need to go back to one you're looking at, you can label it. You can label it, you're looking at a 3-year scenario, 5-year scenario, whatever works best for you. Okay. And that is a kind of a summary overview of the strategic forecast what-if model. Moving on, let's take a quick look at the Capital Analyzer. And Capital Analyzer app is really designed to do a kind of a handful of things. Number one, it's a tool that links your capital adequacy to your bank's risk profile. Now, for those of you that are on the line, and I know some of you are my clients that are Fed member banks, FRB a while back has started asking for Fed member banks to somehow show a relationship between the bank's risk profile and their capital adequacy. OCC is moving in that direction, and I will tell you, FDIC and state-chartered ones I've had it come up little or not at all. So it really kind of depends on your agency. It really kind of depends on where you are in the country. But I will tell you, FRB and OCC are probably a little more predisposed to want this type of data than state-chartered non-Fed member banks. In a nutshell, what it does do is it allows you to do a couple of things, right? You can look at your key risk categories, and by using a wizard, you can drop in what you feel your overall composite risk is. Composite risk is simply the combination of your inherent risk and adequacy of risk management. It results in a composite risk rating, and then it allows you to weight that risk. So if credit risk is 50% of your risk, and you drop them in. And ultimately what it does, as you move out over it, it's going to take a look at your current capital position and determine based on your risk rating and your risk weighting, it plugs the actual capital buffer number or a potential threshold. And so what you can see is it will give you what the regulators want in that capital category, what the implied minimum would be based on your risk profile, what your policy level is, and what your actual capital level is. Now, the one nice thing about this tool, in a snapshot, you're looking at a lot of information about your capital, but bottom line, what it does answer is, what's the delta, what's the capital between your policy level and your actual capital level? And that becomes your free capital, right? So in this case, it's the difference between the two, and I'll show you how that's viewed when we get into the app. But for a director or directors that are interested in how much capital do we have available to us to grow, it answers that question. To those of you that are trying to say, hey, how much capital do we have available? We're kind of plateauing on our growth. Maybe we want to consider either restructuring our dividend allocation or perhaps even doing a stock repurchase. It answers those questions in a real logical, simple format, and also brings risk discussion back into it. And in the end, it actually illustrates your capital levels in all 4 key capital ratios, right? So from Tier 1 leverage, common equity Tier 1, total risk-based capital, risk-based capital, and then total capital. And it shows you what the regulatory standard is, including Basel III minimum plus buffer. It shows you your policy levels. It shows you your actual capital levels. So let's go ahead and just take a quick preview of how that tool works. You know what? Okay. So basically, to start, you would go ahead and click on Capital Risk Analyzer. It's going to show you your first home page, but what we haven't done here is selected your risk profile. Now, in order to create one, you would literally go into the wizard, and I'll tell you guys right now, if you need assistance with this, just please contact us. But like with everything, there's a simple wizard in here that allows you to go in and select your ratings and select your risk weightings, input your policies. It even allows you to run what-ifs and change your buffer levels and then save that. So you can have multiple scenarios. Now, for those of you that are OCC banks, OCC provides you with your composite risk by category. If you ever want to kind of take a look at what they're saying your risk profile is and tie it back to capital adequacy, just take your most recent exam, take a look at the quantity and quality of risk, Take the aggregate risk component, drop it into composite, and that'll help you run it through. In this case, let's go ahead and just grab one. And so I'm going to take a look at Tier 1 leverage. And like we saw in that previous example, here's my overall risk categories, everything from credit risk, interest rate risk, liquidity, operational compliance, strategic reputation, what my composite risk is by definition, how much I weight that risk. And this is a dynamic model. You can run different scenarios. And what the capital level would be in each one of those areas. So if I was looking at Tier 1 leverage, I can see that PCA well-capitalized standards are 5%, but based on my overall risk profile, it's suggesting about a 1.25% buffer. My policy level is 8, and my actual level is 8.3. So if this were my bank, I could come down to the second to the last line here, and basically it's telling me that my free capital is $3.7 million based on this risk assessment. And as I said, this is one of those tools that you may find you're going to take a look more and more at, and it really helps you migrate into an overall tying capital adequacy to your risk management components. And you can take a look at this exercise for each one of the key capital ratios. Oh, got a question. Thank you. Let's see. Right now, this is call report data. Any timeline? Okay, I actually have a question. I'll just kind of read it in real time here. So it's right now. This is call report data. Any timeline relative to holding company data, especially relative to strategic forecasting. The short answer is bank holding company data is a high priority of ours. It's a little interesting because as far as getting data from the Fed, they don't have as an efficient upload system as FDIC does and FFIEC does for their Teradata system. So short answer is we do have bank holding company in our line of sight. I will tell you if I had to bet as far as where it is in project timeline, I'm going to tell you it's probably Q2 of next year before we'll see that live. Great question, though. Thank you for bringing that up. We are highly sensitive to it. And, of course, for those of you that are SNL users, and we do have members that are SNL users, obviously a key strength of their system is you can toggle back and forth between bank or bank holding company data. And we are pushing in that category. Last component on the capital risk analyzer, it does summarize all 4 on one page, which is kind of handy, and that can be exported into Excel, or again, you can use a copying tool. One thing you'll find, if you're ever looking at our graphs, and you'll see this little icon on most, if not all of our graphs, I believe, if you ever just need that graph to drop it into a quick presentation, you can just click on it, and you can select if you want it in a PDF or a JPEG file or whatever. But what it does do very quickly is present camera-ready art, very clear and concise, that particular chart. And you'll see these little icons on all of our tools. Okay? So those are our 3 newest tools, and that took up about half of our time together here this morning. Oops. What happened? Did you see that one? Not this one. Okay. Excuse me, folks. Little sidebar here. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into our refresher. I'm going to move through the other apps a little more quickly. But for those of you who are newest users, and I know some of you have actually, I saw some people that were signed up that I don't think have even logged into the system yet. So for those of you folks, this will kind of be a quick, handy tutorial, because the first thing the system is going to ask you to do is create a peer group. So what we're going to look through very quickly is how to find a bank, how to create a custom peer group, how to use the single bank profile, our benchmarking tool, our performance analyzer, and our bank versus bank analyzer, the B2B analyzer, and we'll cover those relatively quickly. So as far as whenever you're looking to find a bank or create a custom peer group, it always starts with managing your profiles, right? So when you come into the dashboard, you want to click on Manage Profiles, and that's going to take you into your file folder. And your file folder looks kind of like this, and it's going to show a dashboard. It's going to manage profiles, and you're going to have 3 links, right? You're going to have your peer group file folder, your favorite banks, and your Find a Bank one. So this is your file folder. And by the way, for those of you that have multiple users at your bank, these file folders are unique to the user, to the individual member. So one of you can have a lot of different banks, favorite banks, or peer groups in your file. You're not going to be able to see what your peers in your bank have. Everybody's file folder is unique and private, and just to let you know from a standpoint of how the file system works. But as far as finding a bank, you can simply put their name in, or you can go to a more detailed data fields, very similar to FDIC's actually. But when you want to create a peer group, you're going to go in and you're going to see that green button on your screen, and you're going to want to click on that, and that's going to take you into this field that just allows you to define your custom peer criteria. There's absolutely no limits to the number of peer groups you can have in the system, and as far as the number of peers in a group, you can have a peer group of one. If there's one bank you want a lot of detailed comparison to look at you versus them, you can have a peer group of one bank. You can have a peer group up to 150 banks. And if some of you are just screaming that you need to have more than 150 banks in a peer group, let us know. We can probably expand that. But 99% of the times, having up to 150 is probably a good working number. Once you've gone ahead and created your criteria, it's going to drop that peer group into a screen. And if you know the banks you already want to select, you can actually just go ahead and click the radio buttons and select the groups, the banks that you want, give it a name. When you see this option to create a default peer group, that's merely saying this is the peer group I'm using for analysis. You would go ahead and click yes on that, and that would save the peer group. You can also come back in and modify it and add or delete banks, or you can export the list to Excel. And I will tell you, most banks will probably do that in selecting their peer group because they just need a little more data. And you'll find you can select and instantly download the banks that are in that peer group. And the Excel spreadsheet, in addition to having the bank and where they're located and all their ID numbers, it's going to have various levels of detail so that you can make the selection based on performance criteria, whether it's the asset base of the banks, whether it's their charter type, whether it's their growth rate, whether it's their ROA, ROE, net interest margin. You can create the category to determine what your sorting capabilities are, or what your sort is. Once you've selected those banks, you literally just want to highlight their federal ID number, which is column D in our report, come back to this grid and just drop that into the quick start menu and go from there. So let's just do something really quick in terms of how that really works. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on Manage My Profiles, and I am going to make up a bank name. So I know we have some folks in Texas. So I'm going to say Texas. There's got to be a Texas National Bank, right? It stands to reason. Okay, and so that quickly, there's actually 4 Texas banks with national in their name. I don't know who these guys are, but I'm going to go ahead and look at West Texas National Bank. I'm going to save them to my favorites. And I'm going to click on them just to take a look and see some basic data, and I can see they're a $1.2 billion bank, and we'll get back to the single bank profile. But I now know their asset base is $1.2 billion. I'm going to go back to managing my profiles. I'm going to click that little button that says create a peer group. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to go to Texas. So I'm going to create a peer group for Texas National, and they're 1.1 billion. So I'm going to take a look. I want to see the banks between 1 and 3. I'm going to hit search. Okay, and just that quickly, that's how many banks are in Texas with that asset base. By the way, we have 20 million bank records in our database, and the system is fast. It's new technology, and it's hosted in Azure, which is Microsoft's most data secure and latest hosting platform. Anyway, there's all those banks. It's kind of tough to choose a peer group from that list. You can hit Select Peer Group and click on that. It's going to download it into an Excel spreadsheet. Oh, there we go. Get it? And there it is. And let's say I created a sort either by corporate type, asset size, whatever my sort was. Somehow I sorted the data to have a more refined search. And the only thing I do want to do is, what was it, Texas National, right? Was that what we went with? Okay, this was the bank we selected. So West Texas National Bank. There's a bank, and I'm just, in this case, I'm going to choose these banks up above, these banks below. Go back to the system, hit Create Peer Group again, drop it into the Quick Start, Western, what is it? Texas National Bank, whatever. Okay, and that becomes a peer group. I want it to be my default. I can hit that, or I can just save it, and that just created the peer group that quickly, and that'll go into your file cabinet. It's just aggregating them because it's loading those various banks into the system. And you can see I've got a lot of peer groups in here, but I think this is the one. So there it is. It's in the system. I can click on it. There it is. If I want to say banks my favorite, I can. If I want to add or delete. And I can also say favorite banks if there's any banks I want to keep an eye on. Okay? So that's a quick view of how to use our find a bank or build a peer group. Let's just take a quick look at the single bank profile. The single bank profile is really designed to give you a kind of a snapshot, right, of any given bank. It really focuses on the alternative to look at 5 consecutive years or 5 consecutive quarters in key performance areas. Those areas would include balance sheet trends, key balance sheet items, income statement, earnings and performance related items, asset quality, capital ratios, liquidity. And then it also charts out some key trends, right? So the 4 key trends look at growth areas, such as asset growth, loan growth, deposit growth, and equity growth. And then it also includes composition movement, right? So if you want to look at the movement of either the loan portfolio or the deposit portfolio, you can see it's kind of got, this would be actually construction, and I'll show you how that works in a minute. And then, of course, it exports into a single page. I will apologize in advance. This is one of our original apps, and for those of you who have been with me since day one, we've never been happy with the export function as far as it being a nice, presentable one-pager. I will tell you we are putting every resource we have to perfect that before the end of the year, and we're actually looking at it being able to drop into both an Excel and PDF format. So it does export to PDF. We're not particularly crazy about the quality of that output, and it's something we're working on. So I just wanted to let you know that. So let's take a quick look at just a typical single bank profile. And you would just come in here, click on single bank profile, and there it is. As we discussed, it's got your key performance areas. You can toggle back and forth between quarter over quarter or year over year. And if you're looking at a particular bank, you want to save it to your favorites, you can. If you want to use it for further research, you can save that. If you want to change banks, you can change banks out of your favorite file folder. And if this is a strategic planning session and you've kind of discovered this bank and you want to see how they're positioning themselves in the marketplace, it'll even take you to their website. Very nice. And again, and as we looked at portfolio there, you can see construction trend 1 to 4, multifamily, CRE, C&I, and if you've got some ag, it'll be up there, or consumer, and likewise on your DDA side, okay, or your deposit mix. And that is the single bank profile. Moving on, this is probably for my ERM clients, and they were certainly in many cases, the genesis of us developing this tool. And we have 2 tabs in there. We have our benchmarking and key risk trends apps. And what they do is they do basically illustrate key risk trends in over 125 different risk areas. And the 5 risk areas we look at is credit risk, interest rate risk, liquidity risk, price risk, and strategic risk. And it illustrates both your bank, a custom peer group, your UBPR peer group. And the neat thing that our tool does that we don't know any other tool that does do this is it allows you to build a custom benchmark as well, and that's what that does. And then as far as what it's illustrating, it's showing you 5 years or 5 quarters like the rest of our items do. But one of the neat things is from a risk management standpoint, it does force rank your bank within your peer group. So beyond looking at averages or means, you're also able to see where you're positioned within the peer group itself. And let's take a look at what that really means. I'm going to go into a place that's a little different to demonstrate this. So if I go into benchmarking, right off the bat, here's my bank. So if I want to look at loan growth, I can look at my growth. There's my custom peer group, and that, oops, let me got the wrong peer group in there. I'm going to make this my custom peer group. So a quick little move there. All righty. And there we go. So what I wanted to just feature is the first line is always your bank. The second one is your custom peer group. The third one is the system is smart. It will default to your UBPR peer group. And then you're allowed to put in a benchmark, a policy number, or a control point so it can start working as literally a variance report, right? Red, amber, green for what trends are going in any of these key risk categories. And you can see here's credit risk, interest rate risk, liquidity risk, price risk, and strategic risk. So, and then if you just want to look at your benchmarks, you can also turn off both the peer data so you can just look at how it's performing against that goal or policy level. But one of the neat characteristics of this app is when you are looking at each of these key risk trends, it does show you where you're positioned within your peer group. From a risk management standpoint, that's important. This is a risk-based system. So for example, if we're looking at loan loss reserves, the more you have in loan loss reserves, the higher you're going to be. The system is going to assume you have a lower risk profile than if you have less in loan reserves. If you happen to have, higher concentration levels, that's going to push you down the list on concentrations, and the lower your concentrations, the higher you are on the list. But this gives you a level of detail very few systems have. And to the extent as you're doing your own risk assessment, and let's pop over to strategic risk for a minute, and let's just say we're looking at ROA as the deal point. All of a sudden you might be looking at a given bank that's got really a spectacular ROA, and you're kind of curious as to what the heck they're doing, if there's some insights you can capture. Whenever you're looking at this custom peer group list, you can always just click right on the bank, and it takes you right to their profile, right? So you can take a look at what their actual earnings are, what their size is, what the composition of their portfolio is, what their growth rates are. And to the extent there's anything useful in that data, it's there a fingertip away. So I really encourage the comfort and use of this benchmarking tool. It's perfect for credit risk management and for loan committee applications. You're looking at just some really key trends as it relates to the bank's performance. From a ALM support mechanism, you can benchmark your interest rate risk and look at yields and costs, look at balance sheet composition, and even look at maturities and duration. And again, get down into any one of these categories and do a pretty deep dive there. Liquidity would be what you would think, right? Everything from your liquidity ratio to your loan to deposit ratio, but it's always going to kind of give you a feel of your own trend, where you are from an external perspective, be it a custom peer group, a UBPR group, or even against your own benchmark. And that's certainly key, particularly when you're looking at strategic risk, if you want to look at certain earnings targets, if you want to control expenses and keep that item on your line of sight, if you're comparing your dividend performance to others, or even your specific capital ratios and policies. So a quick view of this, but a real handy tool and one that really kind of brings the ability to do multiple levels of risk analysis in a pretty rapid fashion. Okay. And that's our benchmarking. So the performance analyzer is just one of these tools that if you want to answer the question of how am I doing and what would be characterized as the top performance areas in my market, if you will. But you might want to know what the top performers are. You might want to know what the bottom performers are. And the 10 things we look at are asset growth, loan growth, deposit growth, ROA, ROE, net interest margin, asset quality, efficiency, net interest or non-interest income, and DDA penetration. So these are your toggles, if you will. And then you can choose if you want to look at the top decile, the top 25% or top 30%, but it also shows you who the bottom are. And those are kind of interesting. So when you're looking at that from a standpoint of strategic planning, or if you're out there looking for a bank you want to either partner with or perhaps acquire, you can go in and say, okay, I happen to be a California bank, choose your asset group, and you can see how you're performing in each of these key categories, right? So whether it's asset growth, loan growth, deposit growth, ROA, ROE, and so forth. But what's kind of neat about this is you can also go ahead and say, well, who are the top performers? And maybe I want to take a look at the top quartile or the top third. It illustrates it for you. And if you find that useful and you want to just drop that into a quick presentation for the board or for the management team, you can literally go in and, again, using a simple snipping tool, you can just capture the key data you want to see, and that can be dropped right into a PowerPoint very easily, and or you can export it. Now, if you happen to be doing some looking at earnings as a condition for acquisition targets, you can kind of go into banks under 100 million. You can look at top or bottom third, or you can say all banks if you want. It doesn't really matter. But let's just say you're using earnings as an indicator of who might be a likely target. You can go ahead and make that selection. You can export it to Excel. And there's your performance metrics. But you can go to those bottom banks, and it ranks basically the top to bottom earners or non-earners, if you will. And you can grab their FDIC number or their federal ID number, go back to our system, and actually start doing some deeper analysis. But this actually worked as a filter to kind of create your criteria for what you might want to look at. So kind of a handy tool. So when you're looking at the performance analyzer, just think of it as something that can either compare how you're doing in the top 10 value areas. These are the top 10 as defined by investment bankers, by the way. These are the key indices they look at when they evaluate a bank's value. And if you're just wondering how things are going, whether it's in your state, in your asset group, and by category. Okay, and those searches can be saved. Okay, and kind of moving up on my last widget, one of our kind of our favorite ones. A lot of our clients like to just see how they're doing side by side to other banks. And so we have something we call the B2B analyzer, the bank versus bank analyzer. And it does a couple of things. First of all, it has very detailed analysis for both your income statement and balance sheet. But it allows you to choose up to 5 banks side by side and toggle back and forth between dollars and ratios. If you just want to do some deeper dive, oh, you know, I just missed the, okay, I just got a little bit, sorry folks. So you get side-by-side perspective in both dollars and ratios. You can select the period you want to look at, and if you're really interested in a particular bank, you can even drop a bank in the combined section and do some modeling with that. I was going to mention I've got one bank that their board likes to look at 19 banks side by side. Now this tool doesn't necessarily accommodate 19, but it does accelerate the process so that you can go through some quick searches and get there pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and take a look at the B2B analyzer. So it would start with you, and you could be an income statement or balance sheet, and it has line item detail. But you can select any bank that you might want to look at, and these are random, so just any number of different scenarios. And again, as I mentioned, you can look at income statement, you can look at balance sheet, which would allow you to compare portfolio composition, securities, anything within the scope of the balance sheet. And again, you can pop back and forth between ratios and dollars. But you may be interested in perhaps approaching a given bank on an opportunity. You want to see what you might look like if you were to combine. So what the combined bank column does, it just really quickly aggregates the 2 banks and recalculates your ratios. And it does it for both income statement and balance sheet. So it's all there. And more times than not, and by the way, just if you want to keep this less busy, you can also close some of the columns so you're looking at fewer columns. But if you did something like this combination and then you wanted to use that data for perhaps further analysis, you can jump into the B2B analyzer. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and defer to a quick question here. When looking at peers, especially from an acquisition standpoint, does this software pull in specific information on their management team, information such as age, background, that is included in their proxy? The short answer is today it does not. It does link to their website to the extent if you want to use that, but that doesn't really give you the detail you're looking for. We have set up a platform behind the front end, but currently that particular exercise is linked to the bank holding company project because the two kind of go hand in hand, because we'll also have a proxy statement and other data that's tied into the bank holding company project. So currently it does not give you the bank officer profile, but Great question. Thank you for asking. And you can kind of see where, and as I've said to people that have joined us, this is a journey. The platform launched in April of this year. We're adding about 10 banks a month at this time. But this is a very long-term strategy, folks. I'm glad you're with us, and I hope you find the current apps helpful. But we're in a full court press to continue to expand the functionality and the number of apps and services available through the portal. Just summing up back on the bank-to-bank analyzer, we just download that into Excel. So to the extent you just wanted to look at the bank that you identified, you can certainly close these. And now you've got a detailed view of your bank, the target bank, and the combined values and ratios, both in terms of income statement and balance sheet. And then to the extent you want to build some additional formulas, again, this is a first release generation. It will ultimately migrate more towards sophisticated assumptions, but you can go ahead and build in your own assumptions around synergies and things of that nature. And by the way, as far as the data that's feeding into our system, it's call report data, and we also pull FFIEC data. But what is a little different from the other systems is a lot of these tools are interactive, so they're dynamic in nature as well. So whether it's a strategic forecasting tool or the capital risk analyzer or even the benchmarking, you're actually integrating your own data along with these other data points to make the information more dynamic. Oh. So those are kind of the current apps that are running today. As far as just to give you an idea of what's coming down the pike here in the next literally matter of weeks, we are going to be launching a new member homepage, and we are going to be launching our gap analyzer. As far as the homepage goes, this is kind of the new look and feel. I know you're not seeing a lot of it. I'm going to pull it up in just a second. But we really want to make it more of not just the analytical tool site, but start building more of our knowledge center information flow. So you'll see that the help center is going to be expanded, and there'll be more tutorials and user-friendly tools than there are today, and some video vignettes on how to use different apps. The managing your portfolio and your profiles is a little cleaner, and it's a little more expandable under this component. And then we're building in a whole news feed and event section, as well as a member forum and some other information flow. So I'll take you over to the actual mock-up of the site. So this is what you'll be logging into in January, and there will be news feeds. Our info center is actually going to be driving relative and pertinent data around the industry that won't necessarily just be performance-related data. It will be more economic trends, M&A trends, other useful tools on a rotating, or useful pieces of information on a rotating basis. To the extent you want to create a user group or work with us in any fashion as far as using the app, you'll be able to come over to our member forum. And for those of you who are clients and use this also as a project management site, we've just expanded kind of some of the characteristics of the project management, and you'll get little bulletins and you'll see little icons if a recent document has been uploaded. But our goal is to really create more of a command central, if you will, so that you can get to apps quickly. You can get to additional information related to either risk management or bank performance, and even interact with peers or with us through the forum. So that's kind of where we're going with our homepage. And then kind of lastly, as far as the next tool that's coming online, we call it the gap analyzer, and there's other tools out there, I guess, that do this. But in short, what it does do is it takes critical performance data from a ratio perspective, and it converts it into dollars and cents. And it really looks at three things. It looks at your bank's data, well, I should say four. It looks at your ratios, but then it looks at whatever custom benchmark you put in there. It looks at your peer group, custom peer group. It looks at your UBPR peer group and actually illustrates and converts those ratios to actually whole dollars plus or minus variance. And then the second tab drills down into specific portfolio-related data. And to give you an idea what that looks like, this is the landing page. So you'll look at the first section is financial highlights, and you can randomly select different peer groups if you want, change your peer groups or even different banks. But you'll see it'll start with key performance indicators. So it'll give you your most recent quarter. You'll be able to plug in a benchmark. It'll take your custom peer group. It'll take your UBPR peer group, which tends to be what the regulators are looking at you through. And it'll convert the distance, be it positive or negative, between you and that peer group or benchmark number, right? So if you're at a 0.1 ROA target and actual, and your benchmark's 1.25, it's simply going to convert that to dollars. If your peer group is here, you're going to see a plus or minus variance as it relates to your custom peer group, and also a plus or minus variance in whole dollars as it relates to your UBPR peer group. So you can kind of see what the delta is or what the journey is between where you are and where you might want to be, or the distance you have on others. Now, where it even becomes more useful is drilling down at the portfolio level so that you'll be able to click on each one. I happen to go into loans and leases, but the system is going to take a look and see what are your most favorable portfolio areas where, from a yield standpoint or whatever icon or whatever line of risk we're looking at, it's going to tell you what the strongest scenarios are, but it's also going to show you where those gaps are in different portfolio sets. And what it does do is it charts it over time to, if you decide you want to move and increase a yield on your C&I portfolio and you want to track how that's looking over time, it actually does that for you. So this is coming online next month, and again, you can toggle, like everything we do, you can toggle back and forth between year to date and quarter over quarter. And we'll be systematically adding different aspects of the portfolio as you go out. But the initial release will be the highlight page and the loan portfolio. And we hope you find that is a useful planning tool or even risk management tool, and really take a look at the whole dollar, either gain or exposure that exists in any one of these key performance categories. So I am going to look back over to my questions. I see some things that have come in, and see if there's, okay, we talked about the call report, talked about bank holding company data, and so I think we've hit on probably the primary questions you all have. At this point, I know we've run through a lot of information, and I certainly encourage you to contact us directly, and we'd be happy to do a one-on-one or one-to-many drill down in any one of these apps. But we definitely wanted to use today to give you a refresher and a walkthrough of the functionality of the system, and also kind of give you an idea where we see the system going as we roll into 2017 and beyond. So the big things to look for in 2017 is a more user-friendly home page, look for bank holding company data, and actually look for a credit stress testing tool, which I'm really excited about. So with that, if anybody wants to post a question, you can. I see I ran right up to about a 2-minute point, so we covered a lot of data. So just as a reminder, this presentation, if you want it right away, just so you've got it stored away as a nice little primer for navigating our system, just shoot me a note or send us an email via GoToWebinar or through the invitation. I'll get back to us, and we'll send that off to you. But it will be uploaded in the portal. And so just kind of wrapping things up, here's our closing thoughts. We really think it's time that a platform like this continues to evolve, and it's fast. It's articulate in the kind of decision-making data, risk management data it can present. We feel we just scratched the surface on where it can go, but we're committed to continue to expand its usability. The two primary strategic drivers for us is A, that it's useful information data, meaning whether you're making a risk management decision or a business performance decision, it's useful, readily available, it's fast, easy to use. You don't need to have an analyst on your staff to use our system. You can use it directly. And number two, it's affordability. It's our goal that this will always be affordable. In our view, we'd like to move to be more of what I would characterize is the Bloomberg of community banks, meaning, it's so affordable, so user-friendly, why wouldn't we have it on our desktop? And that's really our mission. So with that said, we'd love to hear from you what you like. Probably more importantly, I'd like to hear what you don't like or what's missing. Tell us what you would like. We're very open, and many of you have shared some great insights with us that are in our development queue. And then lastly, if you really like it, please encourage your peers to join, and form your own user group in the portal or connect with us. We're very excited about the enthusiasm that many of our members have shared with us, and we just want to keep that momentum going in 2017. So with that, I definitely want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule to learn more about the product you now have. But understand that it's a long journey for us, and we will continue to be committed to providing you the best information in the most user-friendly environment, and at the most affordable price point, and that is our commitment to you. So with that, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule. I look forward to hopefully meeting or chatting with all of you individually. Thank you so much.